Alright, welcome everyone. My name is K. Michael Russell. I am a comic book colorist. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So, in this video today, this is part 6 in the How Not to Color series. So, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, I know. This playlist is dedicated to common mistakes, errors a lot of beginning colorists make, stuff that I used to do, which is why I'm able to recognize it these days. And so I want to talk about textures today and how to use them, how not to use them. I think for a lot of beginner colorists, it seems like a really cool way to fill in big areas very quickly and easily, and it's a bit of a shortcut, and it can look cool in the right circumstances. The problem is most people at the beginning, it seems like, don't really understand the subtlety that is required with textures, and I'm probably going to say that word a lot today, subtle. With texture in comics, it typically needs to be very subtle, and I'm going to give you guys some examples. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. So first off, I want to show you guys a couple of what I think are pretty good examples of texture in comics. So this is Matt Hollingsworth coloring Sean Gordon Murphy on The Wake, I believe this is. Again, it's subtle. In the background, you notice a little bit up here. There's a little bit on the shark, but not as much. You know, he's putting it heavier in certain places, and he's allowing the regular colors to come through in other places. But it's not just equally dumped all over the page, and there's obviously some thought and a process, behind that. Got another example here. This is from an Iron Man book. I can't remember which one. Again, it's he's doing some really cool stuff here with real paint and digital paint. He's layering it all together, but this is even zoomed up a good bit. So, but it works well on that line art, and again, it fits. It fits everything going on around it. He's not using it as a shortcut, or he's not using it to be lazy. He's using it to create more interest in the line art and help move the story along. So I'm going to use this page as an example. This is from Postal 17. It's a page I did. Now, there is a very, very subtle texture that I'm using all over Postal, and you may or may not notice it, but it's because you guys can probably see that. You have to zoom way up to really get a good look at it, but it's really just there as a way to make the flat colors a bit more interesting, and it's something that I sort of picked up watching Drew Struzan, who is famously did all the Star Wars posters, and he's probably the best movie poster artist of all time. But one thing that I noticed that he talks about in one of his videos is using texture as kind of a mental trick, that your brain puts more, your mind's eye puts more detail in places where you may not actually be doing that much. So it's just kind of a neat way to make a page a bit more interesting and from looking too flat, basically. Now, if you're going to use a texture on something, let's say that I want to use it on this back wall back here. It's stucco or something, and you say, okay, I want to use a stucco texture here. All right, you can't just drop in a texture. If the scaling is wrong, like in this case, the holes in the wall are way too large, and it doesn't really even fit with the rest of the page. And so again, it's not subtle. In this case, it sort of sticks out way too much. And I see a lot of colorists doing this, where they're just kind of dropping things in places that really doesn't make sense. So if I were going to use this, and I'm not going to rescale this now, I'm going to use another example for that one, but I would lower the opacity dramatically right off the bat, because I don't want it to be the first thing you notice. So already it's just by lowering the opacity is pretty much taking care of that issue. Now the scaling issue is still there, and we'll talk about that in a second, but again, subtle. You're gonna get tired of me saying that word today. Here's another quick example I did for this panel. This is still Postal. There is a very, very subtle, like wood grain texture in the background. I didn't actually do this in the book, but I made this one as an example. And you can see this if I turn this off and zoom up on this. It's just it's a wood grain texture that I actually copied a couple of places because the boards were too far apart in the original texture, and so boards aren't 2 or 3 feet wide, so you had to shrink them down and copy it a couple of times to get it to fit in there. But again, the key word is subtle, like it's not jumping out at you. Okay, another couple of problems. Now again, this is another page from Postal 17. Two issues I want to talk about here. Number one is bad scaling. Okay, now this is, when I say scaling, I'm talking about how big or how small the texture is in relation to everything else. Now this is obviously way overdone. We're looking at grass here that is as tall as the guy that's standing on it. Now I've intentionally did this very, very badly just to prove a point. Again, the scaling matters, okay? You can't just drop in, I saw a portfolio recently where they had dropped in like a texture of rocks over like a rocky ground or something, but the rocks were all like 2 feet across, and it was like a texture with a bunch of small little rocks, so it didn't really make any sense. So this is again, bad example of what not to do here. You got to scale your things down to the size they should be without just dumping them on there. I haven't actually seen one this bad, but it does prove my point. The other thing here is the color. If I just show you guys what this looks like. All right, this is exactly how I got it off the internet. It's just a green grass texture. Now let's say that was the right scale and I did want to drop this into my piece. Now the first thing that I would do is actually strip all the color out of it. So I'm going to go to that image. I'm going to bring up my hue saturation, take all the color out. Okay. I'm going to set the mode to overlay. It's usually the best way to do textures I've found. Overlay, hard light, there's a bunch of ways you kind of play around with that until you get what you want. Again, the scaling on this is so terrible, but anyway, let's just put it there. Then I'm going to lower the opacity a lot, okay? So even if my scale was right, which is not, but again, it's a simple, subtle texture now. It's not overwhelming the page, and the color fits into the rest of the color scheme because I've stripped all the color out of the texture, okay? Now, I don't always do that. If the texture's got something that I want to add color-wise, then I'll leave the color in there. But typically, I'll strip the color out straight to black and white so that my underlying colors, or overlying, whichever where they are on the layer window, they're letting it affect that texture instead of the texture affect the page. Okay, another issue I want to talk about with texture is perspective, okay? So with this one, let me blow this out so you guys can see it. So I've already actually took the color out of this. I'm going to put it back in for you guys' sake. So let's say here's my grass texture. Alright, and let's say that I'm smart enough to know that, okay, this is way too much, so I'm going to take the color out, and I'm going to lower the opacity. Now what else have I done here? If you look at this grass doesn't fit perspective-wise. This is a top-down view of grass, okay? It's not getting smaller as it goes into the background. It's not getting larger as it comes toward us. It's just sitting there, okay? So the perspective of the texture doesn't match the perspective in the image. So you can't really do that. It flattens the image, it looks odd and weird and doesn't work. So how do you deal with that? Now I have drawn a very detailed and high quality image of a building here. Now let's say that I want to put a brick wall texture on one side of this building, okay? So I'm going to go to, I've already done this here, so I've gone to Google image search and I searched for brick wall texture. Now I'm going to show you guys a couple of things that are important here. You can't just steal anyone's image off of the internet. That is shocking to some of you, I know, but you can't just steal stuff, okay? So you have to either choose something that is allowed for you to use or ask permission of whoever did it, pretty much. So, and there's services you can pay for these sort of things, but here's what I like to do. I'm going to go to Google image search, brick wall texture, here's what we've got. Now, I'm going to go to Tools, and go to Usage Rights. Now there is a labeled for reuse with modification, non-commercial use. So I'm just going to choose labeled for reuse with modification. Okay. Well, now I've got a bunch of images that I'm able to use they have licenses that allow me to use this in commercial work, and I can modify it. Now the other thing that I typically do here is go to size and set it to large, because I don't want a 200 by 200 texture on my page. You know, you've got to think that the resolution of your texture needs to be close to the resolution of your page. Now, not necessarily all the time. If it's a really small section of your page, you can probably get away with it. But you don't want to use super low res textures because obviously that's going to look bad on your page. Alright, so I'm going to pick this. This one looks pretty cool. This red brick wall texture. So let me go ahead and let this load. So it's really big and detailed, and that's good. So I'm going to copy this, go back to Photoshop, and I'm going to paste this in. And it's way too big, so I'm going to shrink this down. Okay, now I haven't actually done this with this particular image. I've just grabbed this now, but I know that, you know, say my bricks are about this big. Okay, and that's probably too big for this, but it works for us today. Now I need to copy this. So I'm going to, with the move tool selected, the little, it's a V by default, I'm going to hold down, what is it? I'm going to hold down Alt, I think it is. And now I can copy this. Pretty neat, right? Okay, do that again. And actually, to make this easier myself, I'm going to merge all three of these. This creates a new layer every time too. And somebody tell me if there's a better way to do this. Somebody always tells me. I learned something from YouTube commenters. So I'm just copying this whole wall here. And Photoshop CC actually helps you line this up kind of automatically. So, alright, so this is pretty close to being done. I want to get, we'll just make this plenty big enough here. Let's merge all this together. I'm just holding down Alt each time to copy this. Alright, so now I've got my wall. And it's not perfect. This texture is not perfectly, it's not a perfect pattern. So there's a little bit of dark parts or whatever. It's not a great example. You guys get the idea. Alright, so I'm going to merge all this together. I want all those bricks in one layer. And now I can manipulate them all together. So perspective is the important thing here. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to set this to overlay just to have something so I can see through it. Alright, so now I've got my bricks on there, but they don't really fit the building, right? So with the move tool selected, I'm going to hold down Alt, I always have to check that, and grab the, nope, it's not Alt, it's Control. There we go. So I'm going to hold down Control and grab these corners, and I'm just dragging them into my wall. This is sort of, I think this is a perspective mode or something. I don't even know. I don't know what I'm doing. All right, but I know it's Control when you're using the move tool and you grab the corners. All right, so now my wall kind of roughly matches my building. Now I didn't even like ink this thing, or it's just all it's all in one layer. But I can grab that color underneath with the flats, go back to my texture layer, and create a mask, and then it fits that into the into the image. And I actually my my lines don't fit in my lines, which is why that's not fitting. So let me give you guys a better example of this. I'm gonna blow this up so it's too big. I'm gonna set it to normal so you guys can, or let's see what I want to set this to. Overlay. Okay, so let's say that's my final image there. So I'm going to go to my color underneath, click on my brick layer, and mask that off. And now it has fit that to the wall, and then the perspective is accurate, and it fits. Now again, mine's rough and ugly, and this is just an example. But I could go in now, I could play with the opacity, I could change different layer modes and play around with that to see what I want to do there. But so yeah, that's how you get a texture to fit in perspective. So yeah, don't do that. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. If you did, be sure to check out the link in the description for my coloring course. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this. And if you have questions, leave them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. I try to answer every single one of them, even the crazy ones. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good one. Take care.